Lyra, still weak from her injuries, struggled to keep up. Jake noticed her difficulty and adjusted their pace. He led her carefully, making sure to avoid the most dangerous parts of the terrain. His medical training had prepared him for many things, but the harsh conditions of this planet were new and daunting. As they moved, Jake's senses were constantly alert. The planet's harsh environment was not just about physical dangers. Strange, unfamiliar sounds echoed in the distance, and occasional flashes of movement hinted at the presence of unknown creatures. Jake had to remain vigilant, aware that any one of these creatures could pose a threat. Despite the danger, Jake remained calm. His focus was on ensuring that Lyra remained as comfortable as possible under the circumstances. He had brought a few supplies with him: basic medical gear, emergency rations, and a portable shelter. As they found a slightly more sheltered spot, Jake quickly set up the small tent. It wouldn't offer much protection, but it was better than nothing. Inside the tent, Jake continued to tend to Lyra's injuries. He used the limited resources he had to clean and dress her wounds. Lyra winced occasionally, but she remained quiet and still, trusting Jake's expertise. The alien girl's eyes, although still filled with fear, also showed gratitude. Jake's presence was a source of comfort in the midst of this harsh alien world. While Lyra rested, Jake took a moment to assess their situation. He knew they needed to find a safer route back to the shuttle, but the terrain made it difficult to navigate. His mind raced with possible routes and strategies. He couldn't afford any mistakes. Lyra's life depended on it. As Jake stepped outside to get a better view of their surroundings, he noticed dark clouds gathering on the horizon. The weather on this planet was unpredictable, and the approaching storm was a serious concern. Jake knew they needed to move quickly to avoid being caught in the storm. He returned to the tent and informed Lyra of the situation. Though she didn't understand all his words, she could sense the urgency in his tone. With a nod of understanding, she gathered her strength and prepared to move. Jake carefully packed up the tent and their supplies. He led Lyra out into the harsh environment once more, pushing through the cold wind and rocky ground. The storm began to unleash its fury, with strong winds and heavy rain lashing against them. Jake had to shield Lyra from the worst of the elements while keeping his own footing steady. The storm made progress slow and difficult. Every step was a battle against the wind and rain. Jake's clothing, designed for human environments, was ill-suited for the extreme weather of this alien planet. Yet he pushed on, driven by his determination to get Lyra to safety. Despite the challenges, Jake's resolve never wavered. He was determined to see this mission through. The planet might be harsh and unwelcoming, but Jake's bravery and skill shone through. He knew that each step they took brought them closer to safety, and that knowledge kept him moving forward. As they trudged through the storm, Jake remained hopeful. He had faced many obstacles in his career, but this was one of the most demanding. With each passing hour, he grew more determined to ensure that Lyra's ordeal would end in safety. The planet might be harsh, but Jake's commitment to his mission was unwavering. As the storm finally began to subside, Jake Carter and Lyra reached a small, sheltered valley. The wind had died down to a mere whisper, and the rain had reduced to a light drizzle. The valley, though still harsh, offered some protection from the elements. Jake led Lyra to a rocky outcrop where they could take a short break and regroup. Lyra sat down carefully, her strength clearly waning. Jake's heart went out to her. She was a young alien girl, vulnerable and far from home, and it was his job to get her to safety. He knew that her physical condition was critical, but he also recognized the importance of keeping her spirits up. The journey had been tough on both of them, but now, more than ever, she needed reassurance and care. Jake set up a small portable heater inside a tent he had quickly assembled. The heater was a simple device, but crucial in providing warmth and comfort. He placed it near Lyra, ensuring she would benefit from its heat. The temperature was still quite low, and he wanted to make sure she stayed as warm and dry as possible. With the tent in place and the heater running, Jake took a moment to assess Lyra's injuries more closely. He carefully removed her makeshift bandages and examined her wounds. Some of them were still bleeding slightly, and Jake knew he needed to act fast to prevent any further complications. He reached into his medical kit and pulled out some advanced alien-grade bandages and antiseptic. These supplies had been specifically designed for treating a wide range of injuries and were essential for treating Lyra's wounds. Jake worked methodically, cleaning the wounds and applying the bandages with precision. He made sure not to cause her any unnecessary pain, moving gently and speaking to her in a soothing tone. Lyra watched him with wide, curious eyes. Although she didn't fully understand his words, the kindness in his actions was evident. She could see the care and dedication Jake was putting into her treatment. Her fear began to fade, replaced by a growing trust in this human who had come to her rescue. As Jake worked, he occasionally glanced up to check on the outside conditions. The storm had left the ground wet and slippery, but the sky was clearing. It seemed like the worst was over. He felt a sense of relief, knowing that they would soon be able to move more freely. After finishing with her wounds, Jake sat down beside Lyra. He took out some emergency rations and offered her a small portion. The food was basic but nutritious, designed to keep someone going in tough situations. Lyra accepted the food gratefully and ate slowly, her strength slowly returning. Jake watched her with a mix of relief and concern. Her injuries were serious, but she was making progress. He knew they needed to continue their journey, but he also recognized the importance of letting Lyra rest and regain her strength. They couldn't afford to push her too hard, especially after the ordeal she had been through. While Lyra rested, Jake took the opportunity to examine the map and plan their next steps. He needed to find the safest route back to the shuttle, avoiding any more potential dangers. The alien landscape was unpredictable, and he had to stay one step ahead to ensure their safety. As the hours passed, Jake and Lyra gradually became more comfortable with each other. They began to communicate more effectively, using gestures and simple words. Jake's patience and kindness were paying off, and Lyra's trust in him continued to grow. The bond between them deepened as they shared stories through gestures and expressions. Jake learned a little about Lyra's world and her people, and she began to understand more about him and his mission. This exchange of knowledge and trust was a small but significant victory in their challenging journey. With Lyra's condition improving and the storm now a distant memory, Jake prepared to continue their trek. He packed up their supplies and readied himself for the next leg of their journey. Despite the challenges ahead, he felt a renewed sense of hope. The bond he had formed with Lyra and the progress they had made gave him the strength to keep moving forward. As they stepped out into the clearing sky, Jake was more determined than ever to see this mission through. He knew that every step they took brought them closer to safety, and that knowledge gave him the courage to face whatever lay ahead. With Lyra by his side, Jake felt ready to tackle any obstacle that might come their way. With the storm behind them, Jake and Lyra set out from the shelter of the valley. The weather had improved, but the terrain remained difficult. The ground was muddy and uneven, making each step challenging. Jake kept a steady pace, supporting Lyra as they navigated through the rough landscape. His focus was on getting them back to the shuttle as quickly and safely as possible. As they made their way, the silence of the planet was broken by strange noises. The sounds were eerie and unsettling, coming from deep within the forest of twisted trees and rocky outcrops. Jake's senses were on high alert. He knew that the planet was known for its unpredictable wildlife, and the noises were a warning that danger might be near. Lyra, though feeling better, was still weak and moved slowly. Jake could see her anxiety as she glanced around, sensing the same danger he did. He reassured her with a gentle touch and a few calming words. He had to keep her calm and focused, especially since they were so close to their goal. Suddenly, the underbrush rustled and a low growl filled the air. Jake's instincts kicked in, and he immediately grabbed his weapon, a lightweight, energy-based rifle designed for defense. He scanned the area, his eyes darting back and forth, searching for the source of the sound. From the dense foliage emerged a group of hostile creatures. They were large, with sleek reptilian bodies and sharp glowing eyes. Their scales glistened in the dim light, and their growls were menacing. Jake recognized them as predators native to this planet, dangerous and highly territorial. He quickly assessed the situation. There were at least 4 of them, and they were closing in. Jake knew they didn't have much time. He positioned himself between the creatures and Lyra, trying to shield her from harm. He fired a warning shot into the air, hoping to scare them away. The creatures hesitated, momentarily confused by the loud noise. Jake used the brief pause to pull Lyra behind a large boulder, providing some cover. He knew he had to keep the creatures at bay while finding a way to get them out of this situation. His training had prepared him for many things, but fighting off alien predators in their territory was a new challenge. The creatures resumed their advance, more aggressive than before. Jake fired another shot, this time aimed directly at one of the predators. The energy blast struck its target, causing the creature to roar in pain and retreat momentarily. Jake's heart pounded as he continued to fire, trying to keep the creatures at a distance. Lyra watched in fear but remained hidden behind the boulder. She could see Jake's determination and bravery, and it gave her strength. She knew she had to help, so she took a deep breath and emerged from her hiding place. Using her knowledge of the planet's environment, she picked up a few large rocks and threw them towards the predators. The sudden distraction caused the creatures to scatter briefly, giving Jake a chance to reload and reassess their situation. He shouted instructions to Lyra, guiding her to stay close and follow his lead. Together, they fought off the predators, using every resource they had to protect themselves. The battle was intense but brief. Jake's skill with the rifle and Lyra's quick thinking turned the tide. The creatures, realizing they were outmatched, eventually retreated into the forest. Jake and Lyra watched as they disappeared, their growls fading into the distance. Breathing heavily, Jake lowered his weapon and turned to Lyra. She was shaken but unharmed. Jake offered her a reassuring smile and a nod, acknowledging her bravery. They had survived the encounter, but the danger was a stark reminder of the challenges they still faced. With the immediate threat gone, Jake and Lyra took a moment to recover. Jake checked their supplies and made sure they were ready to continue their journey. He knew that they had to move quickly, as there might be other dangers lurking in the shadows. As they resumed their trek, Jake's resolve was stronger than ever. The encounter had tested their courage and teamwork, but it had also shown that they could rely on each other. With Lyra by his side, Jake felt confident that they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey was far from over, but together, they were one step closer to safety. After their harrowing encounter with the predators, Jake and Lyra continued their journey with a renewed sense of urgency. The dangers they had faced made every step of the journey feel heavier, but Jake was determined to see it through. They had come too far to turn back now. The terrain began to change as they moved closer to the shuttle. The rocky ground gave way to smoother paths, and the harsh weather gave way to a calmer, more temperate environment. The sky was clear, and the sun peeked through the clouds, casting a warm, reassuring light on the landscape. Jake's confidence grew as they approached the shuttle's location. He kept a steady pace, making sure Lyra was comfortable and safe. Her strength had noticeably improved since their dangerous encounter, and her steps were more assured. She looked around with curiosity and a hint of hope, sensing that they were nearing their destination. As they walked, Jake took the opportunity to check the surroundings for any signs of danger. The planet's wildlife was unpredictable, and he wanted to ensure they encountered no more threats before reaching the shuttle. His vigilance paid off when they spotted the shuttle in the distance, partially obscured by the low hills. The sight of the shuttle brought a wave of relief to both Jake and Lyra. Jake quickened their pace, guiding Lyra through the final stretch of their journey. As they reached the shuttle, Jake was met with a sense of accomplishment. The mission was nearly complete, and the thought of returning to safety filled him with satisfaction. Jake opened the shuttle's door and helped Lyra inside. The interior was a welcome change from the harsh environment outside. The temperature was comfortable, and the soft lighting made the space feel safe and secure. Jake's team had prepared the shuttle for their return, and it was fully equipped with everything they needed for the trip back. Lyra settled into a seat, her exhaustion evident, but her spirits lifted. Jake moved around the shuttle, making sure everything was in order. He activated the systems and checked the communications equipment, ensuring that they would be able to contact their base once they were in the air. Before taking off, Jake took a moment to sit beside Lyra. He handed her a blanket and some more food, ensuring she was comfortable and well-nourished. She accepted the food with a grateful smile and began to eat. The stress and fear of the past days were beginning to melt away, replaced by a sense of safety and relief. Jake initiated the shuttle's launch sequence, and the vessel slowly lifted off the ground. As they ascended, Jake watched the alien landscape shrink beneath them. The planet's harsh beauty faded into the distance, replaced by the vastness of space. The journey had been difficult, but they had made it through. The shuttle's engines hummed steadily as they traveled through space. Jake kept an eye on the controls while glancing at Lyra, who was now resting peacefully. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that he had done everything possible to help her. The mission had tested his skills and resolve, but it had also shown him the power of courage and compassion. As they approached their destination, Jake prepared to make contact with the base. He sent a signal informing them of their successful return. The response from the base was quick and filled with relief and congratulations. Jake's team was ready to welcome them back, and the thought of seeing familiar faces and receiving support was a comforting one. The shuttle landed smoothly at the base, and the doors opened to a warm welcome from Jake's colleagues. They greeted him and Lyra with cheers and relief. The base medical team quickly took over, attending to Lyra's remaining needs and ensuring her complete recovery. Jake watched as Lyra was taken to a safe area, her ordeal coming to an end. He felt a deep sense of pride in what he had accomplished. The mission had been fraught with challenges, but they had made it through. Jake knew that their journey had forged a bond between them, one built on trust and bravery. As Jake prepared to debrief and share his experience, he looked back at the planet that had tested them so harshly. It was a reminder of the challenges they faced, but also of their resilience and determination. With Lyra safe and sound, Jake was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that his actions had made a difference in a world far from home. In the midst of a chaotic war between two powerful alien factions, the battlefield was a scene of chaos and destruction. Blasts echoed through the sky as spacecrafts clashed and ground troops fought fiercely. Among the chaos, a young alien girl named Lyra found herself abandoned. Her team had been forced to retreat, leaving her alone and vulnerable on a harsh alien planet. Back on the human side, Dr. Jake Carter was busy tending to the wounded. Jake was a medic with years of experience in treating injuries on the battlefield. His calm demeanor and skilled hands had saved many lives. As he worked, he noticed a distress signal coming from the planet where Lyra was stranded. The signal was weak, but clear enough to indicate that someone was in trouble. Jake was known for his bravery and compassion. He had a reputation for going above and beyond to help those in need, regardless of the danger. When the signal was traced to Lyra, Jake didn't hesitate. He knew the risks of going after her, but he couldn't ignore someone in distress. He volunteered to lead a rescue mission. Jake's decision was met with mixed reactions. Some of his fellow soldiers were concerned for his safety. They knew the planet was dangerous and that the mission was risky, but Jake was determined. He had seen too many lives lost in the chaos of war, and he wasn't going to let another one slip away if he could help it. Preparing for the mission, Jake gathered his equipment and checked his medical supplies. He made sure he had everything he needed to treat injuries and protect himself. The team at the base offered him words of encouragement and support, but Jake's focus was entirely on the task ahead. As Jake boarded the shuttle that would take him to the alien planet, he reviewed the information he had on Lyra. She was a member of a species known for their delicate physiology and high level of intelligence. Her survival was crucial, not just for her own sake, but for the potential of future peace between their species. The shuttle landed on the planet's surface with a heavy thud. The landscape was harsh and unforgiving, with rocky terrain and sparse vegetation. The air was thin and cold, making it difficult to breathe. Jake stepped out, his boots crunching on the rocky ground. He adjusted his equipment and started his search for Lyra. The search was grueling. Jake had to navigate through treacherous terrain, avoiding dangerous wildlife and harsh weather. His training and experience were put to the test as he made his way through the alien landscape. Every step was a challenge, but Jake's determination kept him going. He knew that every second counted, and he couldn't afford to waste time. After hours of searching, Jake finally picked up a faint signal indicating Lyra's location. He followed it carefully, knowing that one wrong move could endanger both of them. As he approached the signal's source, he saw Lyra's figure lying on the ground, injured and weak. Jake's heart raced as he approached her. She looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. Despite the language barrier, Jake's reassuring presence and gentle touch helped calm her. He quickly assessed her injuries and began to administer first aid. His hands moved with practiced precision, treating her wounds and stabilizing her condition. Lyra watched him with a mix of relief and confusion. She didn't understand his words, but his actions spoke volumes. Jake's dedication and care were evident, and Lyra felt a sense of hope for the first time since she had been abandoned. With Lyra's condition stabilized, Jake knew they needed to get back to safety quickly. He prepared to return to the shuttle, knowing that the journey back would be just as challenging as the one there. But with Lyra by his side, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. His mission was far from over, but he was determined to see it through to the end. As they made their way back, Jake and Lyra faced numerous obstacles, but Jake's bravery and skill kept them safe. He had taken a brave decision to rescue Lyra, and now, as they headed toward safety, he knew that his efforts were worth every risk. The planet was unforgiving. As Jake Carter and Lyra emerged from the safety of the shuttle, the harsh reality of their environment hit them immediately. The sky was a dull gray and the air was thin and cold. Jagged rocks and barren ground stretched out in every direction, creating a desolate and hostile landscape. The ground was uneven, with deep cracks and sharp edges that could easily cause an injury. Jake looked around, trying to get his bearings. The terrain was treacherous, and every step required careful navigation. The wind howled around them, carrying with it a chill that seemed to cut through their clothing. Despite the cold, Jake was focused. His primary goal was to get Lyra to safety, but the planet itself was a constant challenge.